So I want to just thank you for joining us tonight, and I'm really thrilled that our dear friend Tom Petersmeyer, who has a background as a lot of background in finance, and is just someone we've really grown to love and appreciate in his deep passion for safe parking. He and his wife have a friend who lives in her car, and he's taken that experience that she has and turned that into action, doing something about it. And so he is now chair of our safe parking program, and he's also a member at Neighborhood Church. And so he's in Kiwanis and a number of organizations. And so we're very blessed that he will be our facilitator this evening. And so take it away, Tom.
Okay, this is an exciting time for all of us. Election day is only 2 weeks away. If you haven't yet voted, we hope tonight's presentations will help you, especially around issues of housing. And now we're going to have a spiritual reflection from Jill Shook.
I guess you're seeing me more than you normally would, but as Anthony's getting ready to share the screen passage, well, go ahead. I'll just read this. On one occasion, this is from Luke 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written? Can you hear me? Okay, what is written in the law? He replied. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus said, a man was going down to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Jericho, when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. When he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 robbers do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. So I'm sure we've all heard that powerful passage before. And every time I read it and think about it, I'm convicted, you know. But I want to tell you just a brief story that I heard from one of my girlfriends on Sunday. There was a pastor who essentially, it was his very first day. He was called to be a pastor of a church, and he decided to do something incredibly radical. He dressed up like a homeless person, and they didn't recognize him. And he stood outside the church as people were coming in. This is a very large church with several thousand people, and only 3 people greeted him of all those folks. And so he went inside, he sat down in the back, and people avoided him and didn't want to sit close to him. When it was time for him to come up and do the sermon, here he was, this homeless person that walked up and stood behind the pulpit, and he changed his clothes and they could recognize who he was. And he read from, not this passage, but he read from the passage in Matthew 25 that says, you know, if you treat others like the way you treated him that day, then that's really how we're treating Jesus. And he just said, my sermon is finished, and he left. He says, see you next Sunday. So very, very powerful. I don't know that a lot of pastors would have the courage to do that. But I wanted to share that passage today because I think the way we treat not only those that are the least among us, but how we treat each other with a kind of dignity and respect that we all deserve as made in God's image. So the Bible does make it clear that we're all made in God's image. We all have something in us that's precious and important and valuable. And so that doesn't exclude certain people. That's everyone. So I feel really privileged to work with the folks that are on this Zoom tonight. And I want to thank you for this moment for a brief devotion. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you a brief summary of the evening's program. Tonight, before we go into the proposition, we'll hear reports from the following committees: the Affordable Supportive Housing Advocates Committee, or ASHA, the North Fair Oaks Empowerment Initiative, the Congregational Land Committee, and the Auxiliary Dwelling Committee, or ADU, and the Safe Parking Committee. We'll also hear a report from Jill Shook, our Executive Director, then the presentations on the propositions 15, 19, 21, and Measure J. And we'll have time for discussion and breakout groups. Morgan will tell us the ground rules to help our meeting run smoothly. Morgan?
All right, hello everybody. Please remember to keep yourself on mute and to hold all questions until the end. There's a chat feature at the bottom of the screen. Please use it to enter any questions that you may have, and we'll do our best to address them during the meeting or after in the chat feature.
Okay, now we'll hear from our committees and from our Executive Director, beginning with Anthony Manousis, Chair of the Affordable Supportive Housing Advocates.
Hi there, I'm Anthony Manousis, and I have really good news. The Affordable Supportive Housing Advocates, or ASHA committee, has worked really hard over the past 2 years to persuade the City Council to approve affordable housing at the Civic Center, and they listened. This week, the City Council made an historic decision to choose National Corps' proposal for 112 units of affordable housing for seniors, with 10% set aside for those experiencing homelessness. The city staff will now enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with National Corps and come back in 6 months with a deal for the city to finalize. We are really proud of Pasadena for affirming that people in deluxe, low-income, and supportive housing can live side by side in harmony and dignity. We hope that other parts of our city, as well as other cities, will be inspired by this example. Now, this was a very special moment. Council member John Kennedy praised Mayor Tornick for taking the risk and showing leadership 2 years ago when he first proposed housing our homeless neighbors at the Civic Center. We were there at that time when the City Council unanimously approved senior housing at Heritage Square South, and that was another year-long campaign that we were involved with that succeeded, bringing together the churches. At that time, many of the council members didn't think it was a great idea to have homeless housing at the Civic Center, but we at MHCH were thrilled by the mayor's proposal. We mobilized churches with prayer vigils at the site and other public support, and the council finally decided to do what we, the people, wanted. Now that's how democracy is supposed to work. With God's help and with this victory under our belt, we will move forward to advocate for other much needed affordable housing measures, such as an overlay zone enabling churches to build affordable and supportive housing on their excess land. And we won't stop advocating until everyone in our city has a decent and affordable home. Thank you very much.
Is Anne Marie here to report on the auxiliary dwelling unit? Okay, I don't think so. Is Gary Moody here to talk about the North Fair Oaks Committee? Okay. Next would be the Congregational Land Committee with Jill reporting. Unmute, Jill. Unmute. You're doing congregational land.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
doing-
going to mention briefly about the accessory dwelling units.
Sure.
I know that Mike, who's Mike Veerman, I think, is this your first time to join one of our meetings, Mike?
Second, I was in
Second.
August.
Well, thank
Mhm.
you, thank you. Now you're building an ADU on your own property in Arcadia.
Yes, I am.
So, yeah, so Pasadena has a pilot program where they're making it possible for folks to get a low-cost loan and helping them with design and all kinds of cool things. And so that is going to help probably only about 4 or 5 folks wanting to build an ADU. And so our team the ADU team is really working hard to get people to apply for that. So that's probably the biggest news for the ADU committee. But Mike, maybe you can give us a really brief report on how your ADU is coming along.
I'm cleaning out my garage so we can actually start building. My wife, I'm in Chicago actually. It's a long
Right now?
story. Right now,
Okay,
because she's sending all the programmers in our house, my son and myself, out of the house because she's remodeling our bathrooms. It's probably more than you want to know, but we're getting the ADU ready. Maybe next year, and I think the state has better ADU funding on loan situations next year.
yeah, they're supposed to, that was part of the policy. They had to start coming up with some low-cost loans.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, good. That's exciting. So I'm hoping that Gary will join before I finish the other report. I've been texting him, making sure if somebody could text him with the link for this meeting, I'd appreciate that. Anthony, maybe you can do that. So the report on the congregational land is kind of exciting. I think many of you know that in our partnership with LA Voice, we were able to get a $100,000 grant for our team. And then we got a $20,000 grant through the RESA Foundation. And so some of us are not too fond of Facebook, but this $100,000 came from the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. So go figure, you know. And so the planning department, we now have about 30 churches on that team that are interested in looking at how they could build affordable housing on their property. We just met with another church this last week in Altadena. And in fact, Anthony and I went on bike rides in our little electric bikes all over Pasadena on Saturday, and I was showing him all the churches that are interested in this. So that was pretty fun. But we have New Hope or New Life Church on North Fair Oaks, and they have 52 units with an RFP ready to be sent to development partners. It's all planned, ready to go. And so I'd like you to pray for that the right development partner will jump on. That's supposed to be open just till the end of this month. That ADU committee or ADU pilot opportunity with the city, you have to apply for that also before the end of the month. I did go and speak I didn't actually go. I went through Zoom to speak at a conference in New York on Saturday. And I stuck around after I spoke for the panel, and it was so encouraging. Several of the pastors at very large Black churches, they have both built affordable housing on their land. And as they were talking about what they're doing, it sounded like so much of the same protocols, the same process that they're using that we're using. So it was very affirming to see that. One example is that they're making sure that all of their units on their church land are 50% of the area median income. Now, some of you may not know what that means, but that's truly helping the least of these. It's a really good number to try to reach for. And so, so it's very encouraging. We also decided that with our overlay zone, when I hope all of you on this call today shows up at one of those educational sessions. I know that Sonia has come. Has anyone else been to one of those overlay zone sessions? But they're we're finding that in all these churches, none of them are properly zoned. So we're looking with the city to have the right zoning for churches interested in doing this. And so, so it's called an overlay zone. It would only apply to those churches that choose to build on their property. So we've met with all of the different city council representatives and the churches throughout the city on this. And last Monday, it wasn't a vote, it was just a decision to continue pursuing it. And it was 100% interest and unanimous to ask the planning department to continue to come with a proposal on what this overlay zone would look like. So I'm going to make sure I share a flyer with all those that came today. There's these educational sessions every Saturday till the end of the month at 10, and every Monday till the end of the month at 7 in the evening. So I hope you come to at least one and invite your friends to come to others. So those are kind of my my ED report. I just want to mention that in addition to speaking in New York, which I just felt so honored to be invited, I've also been asked to speak tomorrow morning in Florida, which blows my mind. When he told me what time, their conference starts at 8. And so you know what time that is for West Coast? It's crazy. Yeah, Allison. 5 in the morning. So I'm not a morning person, so pray for me. And then we're doing a one-day institute for San Gabriel Valley, actually a half-day institute on the 7th. And so I'm hoping that, you know, that goes well, and you're all welcome to that. So that's my report.
So Jill, do you want to mention the fundraiser before I do the safe parking report?
I think Anthony's going to do that.
Why don't you do safe parking? You've done safe parking, and then Gary should be here any minute.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so I'm chair of the Safe Parking Committee. Our goal is to open the first safe parking site in the San Gabriel Valley and to expand to other sites over time. By the way, there are hundreds of people living in their cars in the San Gabriel Valley, clustering around El Monte, I would think. At our October 7 meeting, Tricia Keene, an attorney who has worked in private and public practice, including for the City of Los Angeles Planning Committee and Safe Parking LA, specializing in housing and people experiencing homelessness, joined our meeting. She is helping us determine what can and cannot be done regarding safe parking under existing Pasadena city statutes. Sharon Richter, the pastor of the Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church, joined us. She's working with our committee to set up a pilot safe parking program on the parking lot of her church. She said that her church is not only ready to set up a safe parking program, they are prepared to do more than the norm by providing food, toilets, and maybe a shower. Its members are willing to help. Although security is important, they are not necessarily looking for a full-time uniformed guard service for the parkers. 19 churches in Pasadena have now expressed interest in safe parking, and we are exploring how to expand this program into the San Gabriel Valley, where several thousand people live in their vehicles. Okay? Anthony, then?
Hey, quick question.
Yeah.
Did you say Trinity Lutheran?
Yes, on
Okay.
Walnut.
Making sure.
Yeah, on Walnut. Anthony, you're going to talk about the fundraiser?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I need to get it online here. Can you hear me? Okay, everybody can hear me. Okay. Oh, well, here's Gary. Gary's coming. I just got him the link. So let's hear from Gary, and then I'll do the.
All right. I had to go to your blog.
Okay, great.
Jill, you're on mute and we can't hear anything you're saying.
I'm not used to unmuting all the time. Thank you. Thank you for telling me, Carol. So while Gary's getting ready to give his report on North Fair Oaks, excuse me, I'd like Mike to do a brief report on what their church is doing at Knox around housing justice.
Oh. Well, the first thing you should do with housing justice is be friends with Jill and Anthony. That's step number one. I've known Jill and Anthony almost exactly 8 years, starting at the organization of Palm Sunday Peace Parade. And the question is, should a church be connected to the community? And that is actually not an obvious question or answer, because a lot of churches are not. And I would characterize Knox, at least about 7 years ago, not so much, not so much. So a lot of things are changing at Knox, which is great to see. So we've developed a few teams on immigration, racial justice recently, sustainability, climate change, and then also housing justice. And that's been going on for a year on the housing justice team. And because of Jill, we have so many connections. So Knox is on Hill and Del Mar. It's right across the street from Pasadena City College. And Jill said, you ought to get to know the Dean of Student Services, Ketmani. And so the second month, that's what we did. We walked over to PCC and met Ketmani, and she told us about 19% of the students that are experiencing homelessness and definitely food challenges. Things happen, and what's happening right now is because the PCC campus is closed, Knox is hosting the food pantry. So we are distributing food Mondays and Thursday morning. And the delivery truck from Food Bank was supposed to come on Tuesday, but unfortunately the news hasn't come out to all the students, so the turnout is low. So we're still kind of working that out. We'll see how that goes. But the partnership between PCC's team, Ketmani's team, food pantry team, and Knox is really building. So we should know each other. We should work together. And the small little other thing is the housing department from the city of Pasadena, I don't know how they know about Knox, but Shower of Hope, which provides showers for folks experiencing homelessness, used to be at the Hill Branch Library. So for some reason, the library said we're done. So the housing department asked us, would we be willing to allow Shower of Hope's trailers to come to Knox's parking lot? No one during COVID is coming to Knox. The parking lot's empty. It's an easy yes. And create partnership, we create relationships. So Wednesday morning, Shower of Hope comes every morning. And that's why I was thinking, Pete, if Trinity Lutheran wants showers, they might have asked Shower of Hope as well to come over there on another day. But they go all over to San Gabriel Valley. So that's a little bit of what's going on. There's more going on, kind of Jill alluded to. She's going to talk to Patrick and I on a few things, and there's more going on. Nothing boring around here.
Great report. Thank you, Mike. So Gary's our newest hire, and he's going to give us a brief report on what he's done so far with North Fair Oaks and what's happening up there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You know, I was hired on the 25th, so I'm still putting on my shoes and tying up my laces and stuff, and Jill's providing me with the direction. So I was hired to be community organizer with the Fair Oaks North Fair Oaks Empowerment Initiative. And personally, I've lived in this community all my life. I was born on 255 Waverly Drive. I didn't make it to the hospital. My great grandmother was the midwife that birthed me. And what we're about is connecting with the local residents to make their dreams a reality. Our main activity has been to connect with churches that want to build affordable housing on their excess land and get an overlay zone passed so churches can build affordable housing on their property. I've had one-on-one with church leaders, Joe Ford, Elder Wayne Boyd, among others. And we discussed some things that are the concerns that the churches have in the empowerment zone. And we had a great walk in the neighborhood with Jill to talk to the business owners directly. And we went by a daycare center and a repair shop, a Mexican restaurant. Now, all three of them are having challenges right now with the marijuana dispensary that's in between them. Being in Altadena and so close to a daycare center, it's a tough situation that they find it's difficult when parents come and the kidnap this marijuana. Now, we met with people who could help create jobs for the community by installing solar panels and planting trees. That was the Climate Witness Project with Donna Lee, who's the regional organizer. So she's going to be getting back to us to give us more in-depth information on how we might be able to collaborate and work with her. And now, so the bottom line is our motto, and this is how this is what we're bringing out to each and every one. Our initiative is to beautify and not to gentrify. And that basically, that's what we're about.
Yeah. So, Tom, you need to unmute.
I've only been doing hundreds of Zooms. Okay, move into the advocacy, making housing and community happen with a video by Bert Newton.
Hello, my name is Morgan Tucker, and I work for Making Housing and Community Happen. MHCH is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating and empowering congregations for housing justice. I'm pleased to introduce Bert Newton to you today. Bert is the liaison and outreach coordinator for MHCH, a ministry associate with Pasadena Mennonite Church, and an author. Bert's here with us to share his amazing story.
My father was a pastor with small churches and small salaries. He was also a missionary, and when I was 8 years old, we lived in the country of Jordan. We lived next to a hillside where people lived in dire poverty in makeshift shacks. Later in Tennessee, right after desegregation in the mid-1970s, I saw the racialization of poverty in the U.S. I remember at school hearing white kids asking black kids what they were getting for Christmas, and the black kids having to explain that they weren't getting anything because their parents couldn't afford to buy them anything. In my home, the Jesus story was revered, so I took it seriously and committed my life to Christ when I was 7. I knew that Jesus cared about poverty and wealth. I read that Jesus said, "Blessed are you who are poor, but woe to you who are rich." And he laid down his life for all people. I understood that as a child. Later, my studies in seminary led me to understand Jesus as a radical peasant leader of a movement for justice. The gospel gave me hope, but looking around at a world filled with injustice, I often felt hopeless. Then in 2000, I found this very diverse group of people organizing for affordable housing in Pasadena. They were advocating for something called an inclusionary housing ordinance that would compel housing developers to set aside a portion of the units as affordable to moderate, low, and very low-income households. I joined that group. That group evolved into Making Housing and Community Happen. We won that first campaign. But even more than winning, my hope was lifted by seeing people come together to work for justice, demonstrating love and compassion for their neighbors. We've continued winning victories, and that gives me hope too. In 2018, we won a campaign to build 69 units of permanent supportive housing for seniors experiencing homelessness. In 2019, we won an even stronger inclusionary ordinance. Then we received a grant that funds my current position, and now I'm building a network through local faith congregations, deepening our roots in the community and building the power we need to transform our city. I get to use my training in the Jesus story, training from my childhood and from seminary to work with churches. I find that most churches already care about their neighbors and are doing things about it. Several churches in Pasadena have food or shelter programs. One church provides 9 units of affordable housing. Another provides around $250,000 in rental assistance to families every year. I get to talk with them about how their work is the work of the gospel, and how this work now gives them the moral authority to speak for justice. Through this work, we are building community and transforming our city so that one day we will realize the vision of the prophet Micah, where everyone has a home to live in, with no one to make them afraid.
Thank you, Bert, for sharing your amazing story and your vision. We at MHCH would like to invite you to support our housing justice work. To do so, go to our website at makinghousinghappen.org/donate.
Okay, thank you, Morgan and Bert. Now Morgan's going to explain how the Making Housing and Community Happen website works.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Morgan and I work for MHCH. I just want to remind you all about our website, as Tom was saying, so I'm going to navigate there right now, if you'll bear with me for a sec. Okay, can you all see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
So so just want to give you a brief introduction to our website. If you go to local advocacy on our homepage and select MHCH local advocacy, you'll see information about our monthly housing justice forum, which is what you're actually at now. So if you scroll down to past meetings, you'll be able to review material from previous forums, such as videos of the session, committee updates, which you heard live, and any presentations that are associated with that event. Check back soon for materials from tonight's meeting. Also, if you are interested in donating to our organization, you can click on the donate tab here. And then there's an option to donate online, and there's also instructions on how to mail in a check. So go ahead and check out our website at your convenience. It's a wonderful resource full of great information about making housing community happen.
Now we're going to move to our educational program. Tonight we're going to hear about propositions that relate to housing. We believe these props will have a significant impact on housing. We will have breakout groups after each of the 4 presentations on Prop 15, 19, 21, and Measure J. During your breakout group, assign someone to summarize what you discussed for later in the program. Start off with Prop 15. I will introduce Sonia Berndt. We've already celebrated her birthday. So Sonia.
No, that's not going to end. That's all week.
She also got a nice new hairdo.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Sonia, go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Prop 15 is quite involved. You've heard tons of advertising on it. And I only have a very short time, so I'm just going to hit the high points. Other than the ballot pamphlet, I did get quite a bit of my information from the website Evolve California. There's a tremendous amount of information, papers on every possible aspect of the proposition you can imagine. So I invite you to go there if you want further and more in-depth information. This historic initiative will reclaim $12 billion a year for schools and communities.
No. That's not it.
Oops.
There we go.
Yep. Next one. Next slide, please. Prop 15, this historic initiative will reclaim $12 billion a year for schools and communities. Prop 15 increases funding for K-12 public schools, community colleges, and local governments by requiring that commercial and industrial real property be taxed based on current market value. As we know, since Prop 13, schools and communities have suffered. Next slide, please. Prop 15 will also close property tax loopholes. So large corporations like Disney and Chevron pay taxes at fair market value. The corporate property tax loophole allows a small number of large community property owners to avoid paying over $12 billion every year in property taxes. Property tax assessment under Prop 13 is based on a quote unquote change of ownership, which locks in assessment at the purchase price plus 2% per year. The typical property tax bill is equal to the taxable value of the property multiplied by the property tax rate of 1.1%. But quote unquote change of ownership is easily avoided by corporations and wealthy investors because of complex ways commercial and industrial property is legally held. As an example, an average homeowner pays 40 cents per square foot, while Walt Disney Corporation pays 5 cents per square foot. Next slide, please. Proposition 15 will not raise taxes on homeowners or renters. Prop 15 exempts from this change residential and agricultural properties. Next slide, please. Prop 15 also provides exemptions for small businesses. Properties with a market value of $3 million or less will be exempted from reassessment unless the property owner holds a direct or indirect interest in other properties in the state, which together have a cumulative total market value of over $3 million, in which case all properties will be reassessed. Also, an exemption is to be provided to reduce taxes on business equipment, which will also help small business. There's been a lot of discussion, and including on the opposition side, about the impacts of Prop 15 on small business. And there is a study by Beacon Economics, which you can find on Evolve California, on that very subject, the impacts of Proposition 15 on small business, and their conclusion that it will not have any significant impact on small business. Next slide, please. Proposition 15 mandates full transparency and accountability for all revenue restored to California schools and local communities. 40% of the revenue goes to schools, with 89% of this dedicated to K through 12 and 11% for community colleges. The new revenues from Prop 15 will be pooled statewide and deposited into a special fund to ensure that the portion of new revenues is considered additional to all other funding over and above the Proposition 98 guarantee. New school revenues will be allocated to advance social equity according to the local control funding formulas for all schools, which provide additional funding for districts with large populations of low-income students, English learners, and foster youth. New revenues for local government. 60% of the new revenues go to cities, counties, and special districts and will be allocated in the same manner as property tax revenues are currently allocated. Like all property taxes, revenues will be spent at local government discretion. Prop 15 provides for expenditure transparency. Public disclosure is required by all entities annually as to how new revenues from this measure are spent. The measure mandates that public disclosures be widely available to the public. Next slide, please. Proposition 15 will help communities increase affordable housing and address homelessness. Prop 15 would incentivize development and provide local governments across the state with an additional $7 billion each year, which they would be able to prioritize how this discretionary funding is used. And importantly, the funding will provide rare, relatively stable year-to-year revenue. Proposition 15 will lead to construction of more housing in general. Large numbers of commercial properties, especially in urban areas and nearby suburbs, are currently empty lots, parking lots, gas stations, strip malls, or other underutilized in other ways. Prop 15 will encourage the development or sale of this underutilized commercial land by raising property taxes and making it more costly to do nothing with the land. Prop 15 will lead to construction of more affordable housing as well. Increasing the amount of land available will help lower land prices. Given that land is a significant component of the cost of developing housing, lower land prices make it more feasible for affordable housing developers to build affordable housing. And finally, the Schools and Community First, or Prop 15, will provide communities with funds to address homelessness.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, my friends, we're going to talk about a very challenging proposition. And we really struggled with this one. It has to do with housing, so we felt we needed to study it and understand it. But I have to say in advance that there isn't real consensus about it. The California Council of Churches supports it. The Quaker lobby group called Friends Committee of Legislation of California opposes it. The LA Times has also opposed it. And it's complicated. There are good things in it and not good things. So let me just run through some of the features of Proposition 19 so you can make an informed decision. First of all, it's a very complex ballot box budgeting measure, and it's backed by real estate interests seeking to spur home sales. So that's one thing we know about it. It will definitely mean more home sales. And voters rejected a similar measure in 2018. So basically, seniors and disabled people are able to purchase replacement homes anywhere in the state, and they get to keep a sizable amount of their property tax break. So under this new proposal, homeowners over the age of 55 or who are severely disabled would be allowed to purchase a replacement home anywhere in the state and retain the current assessment on the portion of the purchase price that corresponds to the market value of their current residence. Under current law, provides for this when they purchase another home in the same county or across counties by mutual agreement between the counties. So this just makes it easier for people who are over 55 or disabled to purchase a replacement home somewhere else in the state. There'll be tax relief for those over 55 and tighter rules on inherited property. That's the good part about it. Property taxes would increase with the purchase of a more expensive home, but the taxes would not go up as much as they would if the homeowners were under 55. So Shelley, what do you want?
Everything on, so I want to make sure people can hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So the measure also allows eligible participants to take advantage of these new rules up to 3 times in a lifetime. And that's where the real estate interests are excited, because it means that there'll be more home sales. Proposition 19 also tightens the rules for inherited properties not used as a primary residence or for farming if the market value of the home exceeds the property's taxable value by more than $1 million. Second homes and business properties would be assessed at full market values. Now that's a good thing, because it means that people wouldn't be able, who have multiple homes, would be able to pass it on to their children, and their children would not be able to get the tax breaks under Prop 13. So the question is, will it result in increased revenue for firefighters? This is a selling point for this proposition, and the answer is we don't know. It's unclear whether it would be a net gain or loss in property tax revenues. Proponents are banking that it would result in an overall increase, and in a cynical ploy, the real estate interests behind Prop 19 directed that excess revenue be dedicated to firefighting. This move was designed to curry favor with the California professional firefighters who opposed Prop 5 in 2018 and are now co-sponsoring Proposition 19. So again, you can look at this 2 ways. Either it was a cynical ploy or a way to help firefighters who definitely need to be supported. So does it make sense to give property tax relief to those over 55? Well, it makes sense to tighten the rules for inherited properties, but there's no evidence that all or even most people over 55, many of whom are in their prime earning years and have considerable more wealth than younger people, are in need of property tax relief. remember, we already have Prop 13. That means that we're not going to get our taxes raised beyond what we can afford. However, we really need to make it easier for first-time home buyers to purchase homes. So that's the argument that the Quakers have presented. They say, don't vote no on this. But the California Council of Churches says vote yes. And their reasoning is that this proposition will generate income and that it will be used for a good purpose, namely the Fire Protection Fund. So it's really up to us to make a decision of where we're going to stand on this. I think it's one of those propositions that has good features and bad, and it's hard to know which way to take a stand. Probably should have been decided in the state legislature rather than leaving it to voters. It's very complicated. So I wish I could be more decisive about it, but I probably will vote with the Quakers because of my background and my trust in their research. But there's something to be said on the other side as well. I hope that's helpful. Yeah, I see a raised hand from Allison Henry. What would you have to share?
I just wanted to point out to the group in making this decision that this is a constitutional amendment. And I just think that's just very interesting of all of the amendments to make to our California Constitution right now. Should this be one? Just wanted to offer that up. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks. And would that be something as in favor of it or in opposition to it, do you think?
You know, to be honest with you, for me, it's an opposition. I see this as a wealth portioning off. I also know there are rural firefighters against this proposal because it would actually pull money out of rural environments. There is going to be a money shift if people leave the areas and their property taxes go with them. So, I mean, for my own self, that's where I'm falling on that.
Yeah. Well, as you see, it's a complicated proposition and it's hard to come down on this, but I think no is where we're leaning. Any other questions or thoughts about this?
First Connie had her hand up and then Ed.
Okay.
So the position I take on propositions like this that are very complex and are confusing is that if it's that confusing, I vote no, because it obviously needs to be vetted out more. And if it's not clear cut, it's going to get lost in litigation if it does get approved. So my stance in general is that if it's that weedy, is that it's not good legislation. And so I would vote it no. Even though it has merits, it's just not good legislation.
Mm-hmm. So before Ed makes a comment, I just want to make a quick comment about Connie. She just came back from her honeymoon, and she's so exciting. And then she met her husband through our organization.
This is true.
In our inclusionary team. And she is going to be starting her community land trust team this Thursday. So that's very exciting. Very exciting. There may be other folks interested in joining that effort.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to make a comment about this proposition?
Ed.
Yeah, Ed has had his hand up.
So I agree with Anthony with respect to the Quakers. They do a lot of research on this. I trust the research. I've also read the stuff in the voter pamphlet. The League of Women Voters is also against this. And I also like what Connie, agree with what Connie says. This is very complicated. And when it's very complicated, it's good to vote no. With respect to what Allison said, this is a constitutional amendment. And by the way, this was proposed by the legislature. This wasn't a ballot proposition that voters passed around. This was actually put on the ballot by the legislators. And also underscoring what Anthony said, I don't know how many on this call are homeowners. I'm a homeowner, and I still am going to vote no on this because today I already have that protection that Anthony mentioned. I can sell my home and carry forward my lower property value as long as the house I buy is at price I sold it for a little bit lower. And even if it goes up a little bit more, I'm only going to pay the increased, property tax on that increment that's higher. So I'm already getting enough of a tax break. And I also agree with Anthony that this throwing in of the firefighter kind of thing, or forest fires, I shouldn't say firefighters, forest fire kind of stuff. It's a cynical way of garnering more support, but I don't think it's necessarily going to accomplish what they had all hoped for. So I personally am voting no, and I would encourage others to do as well.
Thank you, Ed. I'm glad you agree with the Quakers.
On this, by the way, I frequently look to their legislative analysis.
Yeah.
Because I know that they do a good job and really get into the weeds.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Let's move on to Prop 21. Jill?
Okay, I can do that. I'm just wondering if we should have Allison go next. And then I'll go.
That's fine. Do you want to go next, Alice?
Yeah, I
Sure.
think we'll have Allison next.
Measure J. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
most times I'm born ready. So most times. All right, so thanks everyone for having me here. I won't go through the whole slideshow. Measure J on your ballot is a county measure. And just as some quick backstory, speaking of constitutional amendments, this is an amendment to the county charter. And so that means, like Ed mentioned earlier with the constitutional amendment at the state level, there are two ways for you to do a constitutional amendment at the county or city or state level, right? You can get 15% of registered voters' signature, or the legislative body can place this on the ballot. With Measure J, as you'll see as I move through what this ballot initiative is about, this is a good example of people power during pandemic. So this got placed on the ballot by the Board of Supervisors literally on the last day that you can do this sort of thing. And it was because for months, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and many of you were amongst these thousands of people, so thank you very much, by the way, who were making comment on the various items that would come together under Measure J: housing, public safety, and health response. And so because of all those thousands of comments, we wouldn't have been able to get signatures during COVID for this. So months of public pressure meant that this was put to the Board of Supervisors, 2 votes, that's how it has to go. And 4 of the 5 of them placed it on the ballot. That's not necessarily an endorsement, but we've managed to get endorsements from most of them. So I'll go ahead to skip to Anthony, if you could do me the favor of skipping to the slide 2 on that deck. So when you read Measure J, you will see that it's a constitutional amendment to basically take 10%, minimum of 10% of the county's budget, unrestricted budget, to address racial injustice. This is going to be health, housing, and jobs. This is not taking from an existing budget, and this is important, it's not yanking anything from a budget per se. When you actually read the text of the referendum or the charter amendment, which I'll put in the chat in just a minute, it's actually a very brief law. And it basically is a budget prohibitor, meaning that 10% of money off the top or more, should the County Board of Supervisors vote to expand that, 10% is taken right off the top. So think of it as a type of household budgeting. Anthony, if you could go to slide 11, please. So the amount of money that we're looking at, if we take the 10%, we're talking about $1 billion. And this can go into programs. So yeah, if you can scroll. So yeah, the shifting the budget. So thank you. So the 1 billion for communities. So this is going to be taking 10% right off the top. What I skipped through in the slideshow was how high this thing polled. The United Way is full of revolutionaries, but not a revolutionary organization. And they are full on behind this 100% because of the times we live in. But this has polled extremely high. because of people coming to wake up to this. So it's really a shift in priority. So if we go down, Anthony, to the next slide, we'll see some eligible uses. And for those of you really interested in housing specifically, if you think of Project Room Key and what's now Project Home Key, this move to take underutilized hotels in the county and house vulnerable but otherwise, healthy homeless folks to prevent the spread of COVID, Measure J could actually increase funding. So if we look at the direct community investment that's allowed under Measure J, it's programs that a lot of us already work on or hope for, right? Community-based youth development, career training, access to capital for minority-owned businesses. So if you think about the area around the new Inglewood Stadium and how many particularly Black business owners are losing their life's work, Measure J funds could provide capital. If you look at the last bullet point on this particular slide, provide capital funding for affordable housing, transitional housing, supportive housing. The money coming to purchase Project Home Key sites is one-time money. Measure J money could expand that pool, and we could actually be looking at purchases of underutilized hotel sites for permanent supportive housing projects. That is phenomenal. That to me is phenomenal. It would also assist with things like additional housing voucher and Section 8 supplemental vouchers. But I think we'd all agree that maybe we want to move away from a system that perpetuates inequity and towards something more stable and secure. If we go to the next slide, Anthony, please. I know the PDFs they're like kind of a bear. You have to be real careful with. Okay, so here's where we get to the options for alternatives to incarceration. So this is where we know that if we invest in people beforehand, we're not picking up the pieces after the fact. One of the stats in the slide deck is that it costs us as county taxpayers, county residents, $206 per day to house people in county jail. $206 a day. Okay. And if you think about what that does to somebody, whether it's the economic trauma of being in prison or the social and psychological trauma of having been through that system, $206 a day is a lot of money to spend on someone in the jail system. So what are alternatives? Some of these alternatives are actually preventing someone from going to jail, right? Intervening counseling, intervening supports. So this is where the reimagine part comes in. And Anthony, if we scroll to like slide, I think actually the next slide, or maybe 3 slides down, I want to show you the steering committee. Oh no, this one, excuse me, always and forever. So we'll stop at the always and forever. So unlike Measure H, this is not like temporary funding. This is minimum 10%, always and forever. If the Board of Supervisors wanted to increase that spending, they could. And the better way to think about it in terms of defunding versus not defunding, there are eligible use and prohibited uses of this money. We are trying to renegotiate this budget upstream, right? And the fourth point, the fact that this is supposed to be inclusive and transparent, for those of you concerned about public safety and concerned that this measure would take away from public safety funds, I would encourage you in your spare time, whatever time that is, to go back and watch this year's Board of Supervisors meetings, because I can tell you before this Measure J even was a whole idea, the Board of Supervisors were re-examining the carceral and sheriff's budget because of corruption, violence, and overall community concerns about interactions and interplays. So the concern about money being taken out of this, those conversations are happening independent of this ballot initiative. And the other push on this ballot initiative is for an inclusive process. There are many organizations that have been doing work or actually have tried to get programs started with the county and that's lacked funding. So all of these players are going to be brought to the table in a way that really haven't done before. And I think if you talk with anyone from LAHSA or anyone from any county mental health service providers, you know, you'll hear this concern that there are a lot of great people who know how to do this work, but they're not at the table when it comes to budgeting. So I'll stop there in terms of the presentation because I don't want to take too much more time. Obviously, we're encouraging a yes vote on this measure. I'm going to put a few things in the chat and I'll also send them to Jill and Anthony as means of follow-up. Should any of you have additional questions about Measure J. And if you're interested in doing phone banks to educate voters, please contact me because we need all the help we can get in educating voters.
Okay, discussion. Carol.
I was wondering what the key argument against it is, because it was nicely done. You know, it sounds like, yeah, why not? Sounds good.
Thanks, Carol, for that, because it actually gets to the ads that people are seeing. The big case against, well, two cases against it, or points against it. One, the ads are saying that this attacks essential workers. It does not. In fact, the United Association of Healthcare Workers strongly endorses this measure. The people who are putting out those negative ads are the Sheriff's Deputies Association, so the union. And then we did hear negative talk about this measure in the Pasadena City Council meeting a few weeks ago. Many of them voted against it because they feel that doing budgeting by the ballot box isn't a good idea. I take issue with that for two reasons. One, in a year where we have struggled to actually have fair and equitable hearing in our government halls, I think this is a very good way to do our budget. And I kind of bristle at it when I hear Terry Tornick talk about it, because I kind of feel like he was able to do this with measures I and J in terms of taking a budget question to the ballot. Those are the arguments you hear against it. As with anything, look at who's paying for those ads. Thanks, Carol.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
I want to thank Allison for an excellent presentation. That was really helpful.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me and giving me the attention. Appreciate that.
Okay, last but not least is Jill on Prop 21.
Thank you. And Allison, yes, thank you. That was great. And I know Terry Tornick is maybe our mayor sometimes may get it wrong, but I just want to say publicly, he's been really great to work with and is willing to change his mind, you know, is willing to rethink things. And I think that's admirable. It takes courage to do that. So the Prop 21, Anthony's going to get a little video queued up for that, but that you might want to share. This is similar to Prop 10 a few years ago. And I'm just so pleased that it's come back and it's an opportunity for us to really think seriously about making our rent more doable for folks. We have, believe it or not, it's close to half of our state. No, actually a third of our state is spending more than 50% of our income on housing. That's dramatic. You cannot sustain a society where folks are spending such a high percentage. Years ago, when we started the STARS program here in Pasadena, we had 4 and 5, one home with 10 families in order to make rent. And that's unhealthy. People overcrowd when rents get so high, and it pushes them out of their communities where they have loved ones, where they have jobs. So the whole thing is, let's keep families in their homes. This limits rent increases in a more reasonable way. You still have rent increases, but it's not a dramatic increase. It's a reasonable increase, and it's an increase that still guarantees a landlord a fair profit return. And it It exempts single-family homes. So this only applies to multifamily or someone who owns, 2 or more units. And it only applies to homes that are 15 years or older. And so that's really important, because the lies that I've been hearing is that, it's going to stop any kind of development. And that's not the experience I'm seeing, or that seems to bear truth at all. 2 of the cities in California have the strongest rent control law measures in their city is West Hollywood and Santa Monica. And they are building like crazy in those cities. There's nothing that's preventing development in those communities. And so I just think by saying that it's 15 years or older, that's going to encourage development. That does not stop development. The other thing that it does is it gradually allows those rents that to reset over 3 years, but not reset to market rate, just reset to only 15% of the rent. So that makes it only 5% a year. And so that's a very gradual, reasonable. I wish it was more like 3%, but at least it's some limitation on the amount that they can rent over, landlords can rent, which still supplies very much a fair return. So I think about, stocks, and, a lot of people be happy to get a 5% return. But so why don't we do that little video, and then we'll ask questions after that.
California has a problem. Rising rents are driving up homelessness in counties across the state. Over 5 million California renters spend more than half their income on rent. When rents go up, tents go up. Luckily, there's something we can do to help. Proposition 21 will allow cities and counties to expand rent control throughout California, which limits how much a landlord can increase the rent each year and will allow rent control on housing that is more than 15 years old. It will provide relief to millions of renters in California without impacting construction of new homes. Proposition 21 protects single-family homeowners by exempting them from rent control. If you're not in the rental home business, this law will not affect you. Prop 21 will bring fairness to our housing markets and stable, secure homes for millions of Californians. Join the movement and help expand rent control now. Keep families in their homes. Vote yes on Prop 21 this November.
I like that little video. So feel free to take that link if you want to support this, and share it with your friends and on Facebook and so forth. So what kinds of questions do you have about this policy?
Hey, Joel.
Allison? Yeah.
I just wanted to make a clarification to what you were describing with that 15% limit. That's something called vacancy decontrol. And it basically, and it's what the maximum allowance for a landlord to increase the value of a vacant unit. So it's always very confusing. But I would just point out to everyone that this does not actually bring in rent control. It actually just lifts restrictions so that local cities can improve or expand rent control to things like single family homes and condos, should those single family homes be owned by an individual with no more than 2 homes and it's not an LLC. So it doesn't, it's one of these propositions where it's a proposition to allow cities to do more expansive stuff, hence why it's a little confusing. Great presentation, Jill. Thank you.
Well, yeah, Allison, it just gives the right, if cities choose to have rent control. And it's now no longer rent decontrol. And so in a lot of cities that have had rent control, after someone moves out, they set it to market rate, and then you've lost that rent controlled unit. And so we need true rent control where it doesn't reset to market rate, but it resets to a rate that's still fair to the tenant and the landlord. And I feel like this is a fairly decent policy that we need to try to support, but Would love to hear other ideas that you may have or questions, so, or clarifications you may know of, like Allison presented.
I have a question for Allison. Are there some rent control opportunities coming up, say if this doesn't pass? Is Pasadena going to try again with rent control?
I think eventually there's some little kinks that need to be worked out. And there are some other cities that are trying it. The big holdup right now, Tom's actually the ability to get signatures. But Burbank has a rent control measure on the ballot. Culver City actually had their rent control expanded. Baldwin Park brought rent control in. Glendale might try it again. Pomona might try it again. They struggle to get signatures.
Really hard during COVID to get
Thank you.
signatures, really hard. I really admire any city that's willing to try. Yeah, not the city, it's very passionate people that are committed to this. Typically, it has to go through the initiative process. Very few cities will bring it and just vote for it. So it'd be easy if cities said this, we need this, and they just vote on it, you know, but typically it's got to be the people in the city that say we want it, and they have to go through the whole initiative process, getting hundreds and hundreds of signatures. So Allison and a number of us and Anthony tried to, we got a lot of signatures when we did this before. We got 13,100 or something like that. We were just shy of what we needed. It was very disappointing, but I thought we did incredibly well. The mayor one was 6,000 signatures, I think 8,000. We got more than he did, you know. Yep. So, you know, it was 6,000 votes. Those weren't votes that we got, those are signatures. But it was an exciting process. We got to know all our neighbors. Every day we went out for a couple hours and really had fun walking our streets. But we just think right now with COVID, that's a really hard thing to do. So if the state can get this passed, it'll make it a lot easier now for cities in the future to do this, you know.
And tenants may need to run their candidates for city council, which happened in our city, not successfully, but you know, the majority of voters in the city and most cities are renters. And yet we don't have a single city council member who supports rent control. So what's that about? How are they representing the majority when the majority of people in the city would want rent control? And that happened during, I think, Prop 10. I think Allison can correct me, but I think it was a majority of Pasadenans voted for Prop 10. It was largely because of the efforts of the tenants union to educate people. But all I'm saying is the majority are tenants. It's in their economic interest to have rent control, and yet the elected officials don't represent their constituents who are renters so much as the homeowners.
And I think you're going to see more rent control battles in places like in Fresno County, Kern County, Imperial County. When you looked at the homeless counts in those counties, they were double-digit increase. And it's also where you're seeing the biggest pinch of people with the extreme low incomes and the value of property. And I'll just throw out finally that both Palm Springs and Beverly Hills have rent control.
Wow.
Pretty cool, huh? So the fastest growing homeless population are seniors, and they don't have a way to increase their income. And so it's really important that we get something like this passed to try to keep our seniors in their homes, especially if they're renters. And there's been some real skewed research in the past. I've done a lot of research in the past. It's been a while on rent control. I even taught a session on it when I was teaching at APU in their social work department. We had a debate on this. But there's been some recent research that's been really powerful and debunked a lot of the myths that you hear about on TV. And so even some of the folks that work for our city, I've heard them quote the old research. They aren't looking at any of the new research. And you can see with the new research how they were erroneous in how they did some of their past research. And so Allison has put in the chat that research. I encourage you to read it. And try to, you know, as people of faith, we try to live truth and speak truth. So we need to make sure we have good, solid research. So, but thanks for, listening to my little spiel. And I'm especially grateful that Allison is here to help me out and others. So, yeah.
And Jill, I'll add that research in the chat. The things I added were some other items regarding Measure J, but I'll get that,
Thank you. If you could put that in the chat for
list.
folks. And then Anthony, can you put in the chat the link for that video? Because if you guys, this may have a chance of winning.
Yeah.
And if we can get it over the hump and let people know, every little bit can count. So we can't promote a particular candidate as a nonprofit, but we can promote the propositions all we want. And so I encourage you to do that. If you do want to vote for Prop 21, support it.
Any other comments or questions?
Well, I think we can't support candidates, but because we're a housing justice organization, we can inform people where candidates stand on housing justice issues. So we have, when we had a candidates forum, we had the candidates indicate where they stood. It's still a very valid document because some of those candidates got elected and we can hold them accountable to what they said they were going to do. And I've also done some research on where Biden and Trump stand on affordable housing. So those kind of things we can inform people about because that's our mission. But we can't take a stand on any candidate or try to influence the outcome of an election. So, but we can take a stand on propositions, and that's what we're doing.
So Anthony, maybe after the meeting, since you have the emails of everybody who came, you can send those links to where the candidates, they explain where they stood. And I do want to say one thing about Terry Tornick. He has, as part of his platform to support using church land for affordable housing, he's been speaking about that in all the forums. And he came to North Fair Oaks and just listened to the pastors up there and walked their churches and looked at the land. And that's when he decided he would support it. So I think that's powerful that he's listening to the community. And so I wanted you to all know that.
Okay, Jill's going to take us out about the next Housing Justice Forum and remind us about the December celebration.
I think Anthony already described our wonderful celebration. I hope you all come and bring your friends. You don't have to come to all 3 nights. It's on Friday the 4th and Saturday the 5th and Sunday the 5th or 6th. So on Friday at 7 and Saturday and Sunday at 4 in the afternoon. And it's really going to be fun. I think you're going to love getting to kind of get a peek into our teams, how we do our work, hearing some awesome stories like you heard with Bert today, and some great music. Kind of get your heart, just like Terry Tornick cut right in with where those churches and the pastor. You're going to get to do some of that. You get to see just where some of these churches are and some of their story.
Next Housing Justice Forum is the celebration, apparently.
So the way it works is that we usually meet on the 4th Tuesday of every month. So we switch dates. It's probably why we have a little smaller group tonight, because we wanted to make sure you all could learn about the props and what that relate to housing. And so we changed it to the 3rd because we felt the 4th Tuesday was a little late in the month for that. And we hope that you'll vote before then and encourage everyone to vote. And so, so the other thing is that the next 2 months, the 4th Tuesday falls almost exactly on Thanksgiving. And then the 4th Tuesday falls right on Christmas practically. And so we're going to hold off on any kind of monthly forums for the next 2 months. And so truly the next time we meet will be December 4, 5, and 6. So you'll be getting a lot of information on that. And we're excited, and we hope you all are excited and will join us just to learn and celebrate and get folks to participate in what we're doing, so, and what God's doing. So thank you, Tom. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.